Hello, hello, construction professionals. Welcome to the podcast where we flip the script on what it means to live, breathe, and lead construction today. In this podcast series, we unpack how great construction can really be when you lead with humanity, put people first, and drop the bullshit of the way it's always been done. Our world has changed, our conversations have changed, and it's time construction catches up. Welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Jonathan. I'm excited.
I'm pumped. Some of our pre-conversation about sort of the way construction has always been and how we flip the script and change the narrative of things is magical. It's part of the reason that we're here today because, when I came across SALUS and I did some digging and understood it, every vein in my body sort of just got filled with blood. I was like, this is amazing. Where the hell has SALUS been? And why isn't it on every single construction site? Because it tremendously, in my mind, flips the script on the way it's always been done. It changes narratives, it changes behaviors, it changes thinking patterns. So
We're working on it. We're trying to get on every site. Not there yet, but we're getting there. We're only 5 years in.
After today, we're going to be that much closer. So tell the world, first of all, what is SALUS? Who are you? Why are you here? How did this all start?
Ooh, that's a lot to unpack. Well, let's start with me. So I'm Gabe Guetta, CEO and co-founder of SALUS. Background is not in software. Background is not in safety. I say this quite often to my team, and they cringe every time I say it. But in reality, I didn't actually own a laptop 5 years ago. My background is grassroots construction. So I started as a laborer at 18 years old. In the high-rise construction community, working with a prime/general contractor developer in BC. And from there, went to work with a subcontractor that specialized in window installation in high-rises. And I worked with the founder of that company, who actually brought me over. When I joined, he had owned the company for 30 years from Toronto, had a company in Toronto, and gave me a huge opportunity to grow into a leadership role there, where I spent probably 7 years of the 10 years there running that company in Western Canada, and in a partnership type role there. And we did about 8 to 10 high rises a year between Alberta and BC, and had no plans of starting a software company. Like, if you talk to my friends in my network and said, what are the 10 things Gabe could do, or 50 things Gabe could do in his career, no one would have ever said software.
Okay.
But in reality, that's a testament to how construction changed in that duration from when I was working in that company. When I first started in construction, when you started in construction, I'm sure you can relate. Safety was wear a hard hat, steel toe boots, and if you're going to do something dangerous, do it on a Sunday because nobody's working on a Sunday. And that was just reality.
Let's pull the handbrake here. That's the truth about safety, right? It's like, okay, guys, the inspector's here. Everybody put their glasses on. Everybody shut up. Don't say shit. Make sure
text message goes out to everyone, right? that inspector's on site. Yeah.
Like, we're not going to bullshit. This is the way it is, guys. My hard hat's in the buggy over there. Get it on your fucking head. Right?
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me interrupt, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, all good. And that was the reality of what safety was. And then when we started working with some of the bigger we were working with them before, but about 7 or 8 years ago in the high-rise construction community in Alberta and BC, it shifted. It shifted to more of a compliance-based enforcement. So the big GCs like the PCLs, the lead cores, they were really starting to enforce, you set foot on our site, we're responsible for you. You have to prove to us that you have a safety program in place and a safety manual. And by the way, that safety manual that you gave us has the concrete company safe work practice in it. You have 7 different companies' safety information in yours. So it needs to be customized to your workflow. And then you have to prove that you're following it with hazard assessments, proof of certificates, proof of this, proof of that. And it was a culture shock. It was like, what? I don't even know what a safe work practice is. And now we have to start doing all this work to set foot on site and to get our whole and to get paid our biweekly draw, monthly draw. And so we had to start implementing this, which was very painful. We're talking about 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old window installers. Some of them have been doing it for 25 years. And I can tell you for a fact, Some of them hadn't filled out a piece of paper in 20 years on site. And so
Right.
now you're trying to change the way they look at health and safety and introduce a new pain around filling out paperwork, making sure their certificates are on them, um, and trying to explain to them this isn't just to protect the business. Actually, health and safety compliance is designed to break up complacency in the job, make you stop and think about what's actually dangerous. Because when you start working in dangerous environments, like working on a high rise 40 floors up with nothing between you and the drop, which is window installation, you're right on the edge, you're no longer scared of that. And
Right.
so it's designed to break up that mindset and think again. The reality was that was very difficult to get them to start complying with that. And it took us about, year and a half, 2 years. We had to bring in a safety consultant full time and help us to manage this. But it was paper based, and that process was very reactive. I mean, we're not in an office. So we had 7 jobs going, 8 jobs going. That meant 8 different sites, 8 different locations, no offices on those sites. They didn't have printers. We had to drop off paperwork, pick up paperwork. Paperwork could get back to the office and reviewed a month and a half later.
Yeah.
Those forms are done wrong, forms are missing. You're trying to coach people on things that they did 2 months. It's impossible. And the reality is the company's liable. Like if something happens, you have to be able to produce that documentation. And the straw that broke the camel's back, what created SALUS, was an incident that happened where somebody almost died. Our crew dropped an L angle from the 15th floor of a building into a pedestrian parking lot, almost killing someone. Investigation poked holes. There was a crew that we brought from Alberta. They had Alberta-based forms. Some forms weren't done, so on and so forth. And I got written up at the top of the company. It was made very clear if somebody did die, I could have been criminally charged. The company could have been in serious jeopardy. The list goes on and on. And so as a mindset of for me in general as a mindset, but also how we ran the company now in SALUS and at Tross, which was the window installation company, is use your failures to drive yourself forward. Failure is fine as long as you're absorbing it, learning from it, and utilizing it to push yourself forward faster than if it never happened. We could not get past paper. We could not get past this mindset of, okay, we're going to change things, but we're still always going to be reactive. We need real-time insight into what's happening to ensure that we're properly protected, and as a business and our employees. And that's where the journey to find a software started. Couldn't find something in the market that was user-friendly, mobile first, wasn't designed for a safety administrator and forcing the field to just comply, and also nothing that properly replicated and represented the industry hierarchies and workflows. Construction is complicated. You have a general contractor, you have a sub, that sub could have a sub, you have workers, they all work on different sites, but for the same GC or different GCs. It's this network that is created. And health and safety is shared. So you might have to do something and share it with the general contractor, but also share it to your subcontractor, but also get many different workers sign off on it. Go online, offline, into a parkade, out of a parkade. None of that stuff was available. And so I know that intro is very long-winded, but that's how SALUS started. I joined forces with a good friend of mine who owned a software company at the time, Robbie Clifford. He was now the co-founder and CTO, and we started SALUS. And then within a year, we brought in our third co-founder who has 25 plus years in SaaS, software as a service, because we needed that representation to build the infrastructure for scale. And now we're on the journey that we're on today.
Thank you for all that. And I want to continue to stay here for a moment, because what we're doing here, you touched on some really interesting points that are accurate in construction, right? Safety has more times than not always been and I say always as a heavy word purposely, been a reactive, let's be reactive about it. And what do? Photocopy the same form over and over and just, fill in the new date and, do our due diligence. And it goes back to the office and it becomes, did we do our due diligence to check the boxes? Yes. So that we can get our rebates at the end of the year or not be liable, or let's talk about the real nuts and bolts of the shit, right? And then sort of what happens is there becomes a disconnect between the office and the sites where it's like, fuck off. If it's the office, fuck off. I don't want to talk about safety. You've never done this before. You know what it's like to be in a construction. Yeah. So now, Gabe, you're stepping in here going, guys, I see you. I hear you. I understand you. I've lived it. Right.
Yeah.
And so SALUS shows up, and let's continue to stay on the SALUS platform for a moment and talk about actually what it is. So SALUS, so now you've talked about it, and SALUS becomes software in the hands of the people on the sites, is a mobile thing. And I'm going to pivot back. I get this, but it's nicer when it comes from you. Pivot to how it helps. What problem are we solving?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch on one thing you said there as well, because health and safety is very complex. It's complex in many ways. There's a stigma around health and safety, for starters. There's a stigma just in general on, I remember being on site and it's like, you don't wear your ear protection at the beginning, because if you're wearing like when I was 18, you're wearing ear protection, it's almost like not cool. There's a stigma around trying to be safe. But this is all starting to evolve and change. But a lot of it is just the base understanding of what it is that we're doing in health and safety. You touched on it. Checkbox safety is photocopy the form, sign it at the bottom, and submit it. That's checking a box that's basically just saying, yeah, you're protecting the company. But what does that mean, protecting the company? The reason health and safety processes and procedures are in place is to actually protect the worker. And if you're proving that you're actually protecting the worker, you are therefore protecting the company. Mm-hmm. And that gets lost. That gets lost even when you roll out digital health and safety. People are, you have to understand the basis behind what you're doing. And if you're creating forms that are designed to just help the worker sign a form, not read it and check the box, you're creating complacency within the thing that you're trying to protect yourself from complacency. And so it has to be designed to make them stop and think, but also has to be designed to be a part of their workflow. One thing I love is when companies tie health and safety to quality. Workers and companies, when they have a great quality process in place, matched with a great health and safety process, they're winning on so many different levels. Companies will not push back around quality. That's the nature of what they do. We want to do what we do the best way possible. And that's awesome. You tie those workflows, like a safe work procedure is essentially you're analyzing the best way to do something. Let's say you're installing a window. What is the best way to do it? How you do it, and also tying that into, hey, if it's over 500 pounds or X amount of weight, make sure you use this device and make sure you have this many people. Make sure that you have these things in place to protect the people around you and yourselves. And that's tying directly into just the best practice and the quality of how you perform that. And so if you tie all that together, you're winning. And so how does SALUS help this situation? SALUS helps this situation. First and foremost, SALUS is not the regulatory provider, right? We're not here to say, this is how you do it. These are the regulations in your territory. You're an electrician in this district, whatever it may be. That's not for us to do. That's why you have safety consultants, you have safety professionals. There's WorkSafe BC. There's so many different government bodies that can help. We're here to ensure that we make safety manageable again. In reality, safety is turned into, yes, I personally believe the paperwork, if done properly, really does make a difference. But if the reality of paperwork or the forms that is being done, I shouldn't say paperwork, I said digital forms or whatever it may be, when those are being done by paper, what comes out of that is all of a sudden you have safety professionals that used to be in the field mentoring and actually checking in on people and showing them how to work safe and talking through things. They're scrambling around the site trying to collect paper, file paper, make sure the company's protected, and maybe they have 15% of their time, 20% of the time to spend in the field. Right. So what we're trying to do is replicate the existing workflow for starters. So we don't want you to download SALUS and say, oh, we have to change all of these workflows that we're so used to because now we're going digital. We can't go into a parkade or in the middle of nowhere where there's no cell service because we're now digital. We have to make it our goal as SALUS to make sure that if you're doing a paper form or you're doing a digital form, the flows that you can do on paper are just as easy to do on digitally. You need somebody else to sign that form. You need to go online, offline. those flows have to be replicated. It can't be us saying, oh, we're digital, you just have to adopt. We have to push ourselves to innovate, and that's what we've done. And when you get that in place, that means you're solving the accessibility problems. Workers have the ability to have access to health and safety at their fingertips. In reality, on a job site, you have a job box. It has your safety manual that might be 300 pages.
Right.
That job box might be 4 floors in between where your crew is working and they are working. They're never going to go to the job box, open it up, and look at something. A new and young worker that has forgot what the safe work practice or procedure was for doing something is not going to go and scroll through their 300-page manual that's 4 floors down to refresh. But if it's on their phone, they absolutely will, or they have that ability to. And so replicating those workflows, tying it to ease of use and accessibility allows you to unlock more around health and safety. And I could go on and on about all the different things that are not possible unless you start introducing digital. But I mean, we only have so much time. So.
Well, what we're talking here is that we're talking about a holistic approach to safety. We're actually we're transitioning here from thinking safety to be a heavy, I must do this or I'm going to be reprimanded philosophy versus, it's a culture of working safe. It's a culture of thinking safe first, because when we operate from that mindset, everything else changes. Now you're talking about accessibility, right? So if a worker knows tomorrow, I'm going to be doing, plugs and switches. I don't know. I'm using plugs. What's the safe work procedure, or where's the MSDS? Where's the access to the forms? The train. What do I need to know to hoist that 500-pound window? And also, there's also access to other documents on that software, right?
Yeah. So I think that it's not one thing. It's so many different things coming together to make it right. So one, you have to have the company culture. You'll never get anywhere without a top-down, top-level buy-in around health and safety emanating through the entire company, and nobody is scared to ask questions or be safe, right? There can't be a stigma there. It has to be absorbed. You also have to have that accessibility so that when they're doing it, it's not hard to be safe. You have to make it as easy as possible to make them safe. But the one thing that and a lot of people disagree with me on this is you do need enforcement. You do need that penalty, you have to have that disciplinary aspect. And I'll tell you why. Let's look at society. If we didn't have seatbelts as the law in our cars, where you would get a ticket or a fine for not having it, nobody would wear their seatbelt. Doesn't matter how much information you put to society about you're going to die without it, whatever it may be, nobody would do it. Cell phones, same thing. People would still be texting and driving. Drinking and driving, as bad as it is to say, if there was not the significant aspect of the penalties, you still would not have people abiding by that. You'd have a lot of people drinking and driving and so on and so forth. But around that, you also need the cultural impact of like people around you saying, no, put that seatbelt on. When you're in a car, people are like, put your seatbelt on, right? And it has to be easy to do. So we have to understand what human nature is, and we have to base our world in reality, okay? And so it has to be a combination of everything because we're human beings. And in reality, the reason why we texted and drove, why we didn't drive with a seatbelt, why we eat a sandwich when we're driving on the highway is because we no longer identify that us driving 120 kilometers or 100 kilometers down the highway and a semi is going the other way and there's a 6-inch gap between you and the semi, being the dotted line or the solid yellow lines in between, you don't identify that as being dangerous anymore. Even though if you took somebody that has never seen our highway system or been in a vehicle before, put them in a vehicle and drove like that, they would lose their mind. It's insane, right? Planes don't even get anywhere near that. And you have cars that are, right? But we don't identify that with being dangerous anymore. So we need that it's not even breaking up complacency because we're still complacent to it. We need a different level to anchor us in being safe.
Right. Right. So that's why, coming back to the job sites, that's where the compliance piece still holds weight, still has lots of value, where we cannot get away from it, right?
Yeah, you have to have these checks and balances in place. Um, we're only as strong as our weakest link, especially on jobs like high rises where you could have, a crew of 10 people working under a crew of 30 or 5 or whatever it may be, all different companies, all different safety programs and processes. You might have a 500-person company working underneath a 10-person company. 10-person company
Mm,
is not going to have the same access to safety, um, like professionals, whatever it may be. They don't have the same bandwidth. And so we have to find a way to ensure, and general contractors, for the most part, especially in high-rise construction, are trying to be that kind of centering ground where it's like they're saying, no, this is what we all have to do. You meet or exceed it, or you can't work on this site.
right. And so what have you seen? How has SALUS augmented experience, and like sort of what patterns or behavior changes are you noticing?
I think the biggest thing is construction is a community and network. Like, you don't have other industries. I mean, oil and gas and mining, there's many people working on one site or one project. But construction, you have so many different trades working on a site together, so many different companies. No other industry understands how that works. And so one of the biggest things with health and safety is, like I just said before, it's not just managing your world. Your vertical is your company. You're actually responsible for ensuring that everybody around you is not going to be affected by what you're doing. For example, we dropped that L angle off the 14th floor of a building, could have killed somebody. You drop a tape measure. You might not kill your own person, you might kill somebody else's employee or a pedestrian or somebody else. And so one of the things that we're seeing is an industry starting to come together. It's not there yet, where general contract, and the way I think about this is, enforcement wise, it's similar to like taxes. Everybody is like, you contract somebody to do work and they don't have a GST number and they're not proving that they're doing their taxes, you're actually going to be liable to pay their taxes. Same enforcement that's happening with health and safety. The person that's handing out these contracts, not only do they have to make sure they have workers' comp coverage, but they have to ensure that those individuals that are coming on their site have a proper health and safety program. Because if an incident happens, it's not just going to be the subcontractor, it's going to be the prime contractor and anyone else that's connected. And that's starting to work. It needs a little more enforcement in different parts of the industry, but it's starting to work. And what you're starting to see is collaboration around this. Collaboration from the prime contractor, general contractor to sub. The subs starting to get it. The subs have to get it, and they're starting
Yeah.
to get it, understand, and they're starting to contribute. And what our system is very unique in is we've mapped that world out where subcontractors, general contractors, workers all have their own profiles in our system. It's not duplicated. It's all based in what we call single source of truth. So our system is starting to map out the actual workflows and hierarchies of the industry so that one sub goes from one site to another site. They don't have to create a new profile. They don't have to do this. They're just going, scanning a QR code, doing their work. The health and safety is following their natural workflow of what they do in their business within our system. I know that's probably a lot to kind of conceptualize, but the goal is that we are taking it higher than a company. It's not just a software for a company, it's a software for an industry, and starts pulling
Uh,
together all of this together. Um, Now that's a long journey and we're, just getting started, but the cool thing is we're starting to see this come together. We're starting to see the collaboration because there's these networks, as you know, from working in the electrical space. You might work for one general contractor on one site, but you have 30 other GCs or 15 other GCs you work with, but it's all in high-rise construction or it's all in single-family wood frame, whatever it is. High-rise construction, you might have in BC, maybe there's 25 general contractors that are really prominent,
yeah.
but there's 800 subs that make up that space. If 4 GCs are working, they're probably using, 70% of those subs are working on those sites because it's all just this network that's created in that space. Everybody knows each other. Everybody works on each other's sites,
Yeah. So now you're actually creating an ecosystem
creating an
holistically.
ecosystem. Yeah, and trying to create a community where safety shouldn't be competitive. How do we share?
Yeah.
Not we're not like SALUS isn't about sharing data. It's about creating a community where a safety professional from one company will say, "Hey, I want to make these forms that we created, the templates, accessible for that 5-person company that doesn't have the ability to do it." Or I want to share my expertise with those 10-person companies, or collaborate one big competitor to another. They're probably experiencing a lot of the same things around health and safety. How do we
Oh my God.
connect and learn and grow? And it is happening. We're not like the forefront for creating this, but how do we start creating a more accessible community, right? Where people can learn and stop repeating the same incidents.
That's it. And this is breaking this is breaking the patterns. This is changing the nerve and dropping the stigmatism of the old adage of, well, fuck, are we protected? Like, did we do what we were supposed to do? Okay, good. Well, it's not us, it's them. Right. So now what you're saying is, well,
Everyone's scared to be liable. Everyone's
everybody's
scared to
scared to be
say we
liable.
made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now you're saying, guys, we're going to collaborate here. And if it works in this space for this individual, then let's share that information. That's
Yeah.
that ecosystem. It's a holistic approach. That's that, human beings are designed to connect. This is connecting. This
Yeah.
is connecting.
Exactly. 100%.
You said something I'm curious about. When you talk, I heard you say single source of truth. What does that mean?
Single source of truth. So, single source of truth means that in our system we don't duplicate. Like, so if you, in a lot of software systems, if you are you sign up for a software and you are putting, let's say you're working with another company. Salesforce is a good example. I'm not sure if you're
Sure.
familiar with Salesforce.
Yep. Yep.
Salesforce, it's a CRM. You buy Salesforce, and let's say I am selling to construction, so I'm going to go talk to Leadcore. So I'm going to create Leadcore's profile in our system. I'm going to go
Yep.
create PCL in our system. I'm going to do this, do that. Well, Leadcore and PCL has probably been created, 2,000 times or 10,000 times with other companies using Salesforce. So it's
Sure.
not necessarily a single source of truth in that regard. It's a single source of truth as a system of record for your company, where Leadcore is going to be once in your ecosystem that you created for your company, but not holistically across an industry. And so what we did is we took it to another level. We said, no, we want to replicate the real world of construction. There is only one Leadcore. So if you're going to work with Leadcore, or sorry, if you're, let's say, let's use another example. If Leadcore is working with Tim's Plumbing only exists once. Leadcore is going to connect with Tim's Plumbing. Tim's Plumbing is going to create a profile. Then PCL starts working with Tim's Plumbing. They're just going to connect to Tim's Plumbing that already exists. So it's kind of like thinking of LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, you're not twice in LinkedIn. Sure, you could potentially create your profile under a different name and everything else, but technically you're in LinkedIn once. So it's a community of single source of truth. I am who I am. The way where we're trying to go with this is actually taking it to the next level. I mean, LinkedIn is self-validation. So when I'm on LinkedIn and I say, I work for this company, I work for that company, I work for the other company, those companies are single source of truth. That company only exists in LinkedIn once, and I'm tying it to it. But nobody's validating that. We continuously have people joining our LinkedIn say they work for SALUS, and they don't, but they can say they do. So in our system, when you work around single source of truth, and companies are working for each other and workers are working for companies, but they're all defined in single source of truth, our system starts creating industry validation, right? That company actually worked for these companies. They actually worked on these high-rise projects. They actually did this. You don't want to divulge private information. You'll never be able to share, incident information or form information or any of that, but it starts creating a real community around what people are actually doing with working with each other, and allowing them to work in an easier way.
Oh yeah.
If you create a profile in SALUS, you shouldn't have to go to when you go work for another general contract, you shouldn't have to recreate anything. You should just be able to walk on site and your workers scan a QR code and the system already knows who you are because you're already a part of that company, right?
Well, that's one of the biggest things before you even start the job. Can I get all your safety documentation? And it takes a
Exactly.
long period of time to gather the safety documentation and update it and change it. And then it's like, a 300-page binder that truthfully nobody ever opens anyways. Right?
Exactly. And our goal is to pull that world together. Like the site docs of the world, the e-compliances of the world, the safe sites of the world, these companies that are competitors, I would love for us to come together. How do we make our customers' lives easier? Because in reality, no company is going to have every single subcontractor on a site, like as far as a digital safety provider. So like Leadcore or one of these big GCs, they might have thousands and thousands of subs. But when they're having to collect safety data, it's coming from all these different, it could be coming from Dropbox, it could be paper, it could be from site docs, it could be from e-compliance. We need to come together as a community and say, how do we connect so that whoever is running that project, let's say SALUS is running the project, all the information from all these different providers is automatically integrated and coming together so that we work as a community. AuditSoft is a great example. We're working very closely with AuditSoft, solely focused on core audits and audits for construction and other industries, but just audits. So they're like the Switzerland. They work with associations like IHSA, AASP on making sure that any audits that come for the core audit are going through AuditSoft. Makes the audits 10 times easier. And we started integrating with them because we want to make sure that the other side of that is like we have the health and safety management system. Everything they need from the audit is going to be coming from the safety management system. Why wouldn't we make that easier? Break the barriers down, build a relationship. And it's really cool when you start to see all these different perspectives and leaders coming together. Like Ben Snyman was the original founder and CEO of eCompliance, then started AuditSoft, then we got connected, and it's really fun. And it's really cool, the conversations we have and the things that we see that we can bring together by bringing associations, other software vendors, safety professionals, auditors together. There's nothing we can't do, but we've got to break down those competitor barriers and work together.
This is interesting, right? There's a couple of things. You're also, in my opinion, you're easing the stress level of the management side of there's human capital, there's human people who have to do these exercises. Like, oh my gosh, if I have to work with, if we're a core certified company, we have to produce all these documents on. I mean, that takes somebody's time and energy.
Yep.
And now with stress, right? With the integration process, it's that much more seamless. You're building a network of validation of, okay, this individual. Well, now I can also, I don't know, maybe I can share resources. Maybe Jonathan can also, now that Jonathan has everything shown, he can go work for, the PCL, then Leadcore, and then I'm not sure. I'm brainstorming things to say, like, everything is now validated and it's actually there, right? And you're sort of closing that generational gap, I think, of now once even a worker does something once, it's there. It's not like every job. Oh, I need to see, I need another copy of your license or your certificate, or it's there, because that creates that frustration. Yeah, but I sent it in. Well, I don't know where it is now, right? Well, say this helps manage that, right?
Yeah, and there's other thing. I mean, like it's pulling the community of health and safety isn't new, but the new way health and safety is being done is new, and the movement around health and safety technology is new. And so, for example, you touched on certificates. So I know for a fact there's many companies, it doesn't matter what that worker comes to their company with as far as certificates, they can't validate that those certificates are actually valid, they were trained properly, or that a provider is accredited. And so they retrain them.
Yep.
And then some of those customers or companies even won't let those workers take those certificates with them. I understand to a level why, because I train somebody 2 weeks later, they leave. I get that, but I don't necessarily agree with it, because at the end of the day, they're trained, it's their certificate. But there's companies out there like Credivera is a company that is basically working on accrediting people's profiles. So they do the work on accrediting that vendor that you say you got training with is accredited, that you actually got training from them. And so like
Hmm.
like you see where I'm going with that? Like a worker comes with with a SALUS profile, they have certificates, the Credivera checks on it. Like these are just things that would be incredible in the future, and they're very far like uh, down the road. But these are the things that technology can start to power. Like there's leaders that are specifically focused on these things. And in time, over the next few years, the goal is we all start coming together to pull those verticals together that are not siloed anymore, right? Salus alone is not as powerful as Salus and Auditsoft, Salus
Yeah.
and Credivera, Salus and certain aspects of e-compliance, site docs, all of our competitors. Like we need to touch at certain areas. We have to, in my opinion. If not, our customers will always struggle to a certain level.
Well, and the whole safety ideology and safety culture is never fully adopted or adapted to. It simply it still
Yeah.
becomes a check and balance. I must do this, and then oh, by the way, I must do this, and I must do this. And really, what does the person want to do? They want to work safe,
They
right?
they want they want to work safe, but they also like let's be realistic. Health and safety sucks, right?
Yep.
Like when we
Yep.
think about health and safety, I said this to our team, and they're like, Gabe, you can't say that. I'm like, well, how did you like COVID? Was it nice, warm, fuzzy? Like staying at home, having to fill out these forms all the time, wearing a mask, all that stuff. It was something that it's exactly like health. That's health and safety. It sucked.
It
Everyone,
was
like
awful.
nobody liked it, but that's so that we have to also acknowledge that, like going to work, putting on a mask, putting eye protection on, and putting hearing protection on, putting steel toe boots, putting a high vis vest, putting a hard hat on, filling out a form before you actually do your work that you're trained to do is not fun. It sucks. You're never going to make that fun, but we have to base it in the understanding of it's the same reason that I use uh, a Hilti hammer drill to drill this in instead of a hand cranked hammer drill to do what. Like we can make it easier and better. It's a necessary thing. It's a tool, just like a drill, just like a hammer. Just it has to be a part of the process. It has to be trained in trade school to be just like you use a hammer for this, you use safety for that. It has to be a part of the workflow, ingrained and embedded. And then it starts to become better.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting, right? And comes back to something you talked about earlier. Is it starts from the top down approach. Like it actually has to be welcomed and adopted in. We're no longer talking about sweeping stuff under the rug because that's a different version of how safety has been. Right, something happens and it's like cover your ass. How can we sweep it up? Who can we pass this off to? And did we do our checks and balances right?
Yeah. And that's hard.
This conversation, we're way past that, right? We're way past that.
Yeah. And top down can be hard because a lot of construction owners, that's not what they grew up with. They didn't grow up with these requirements. I mean, it was get your job done. And they built incredible businesses from getting to work, getting it done. And of course, none of them didn't want to come home safe. None of them would say that they don't care about their employees and they don't care about them coming home safe. It's just, it's so foreign. It's a completely foreign culture and experience. And so we have to find a way to get more leaders that are later on stages of owning those businesses that have owned them for 10, 15, 20 years that probably are not, it doesn't come natural to them. We have to find a way to get them to buy in and also pave the way, which is a much better shape, the next generation of leaders. They have a different understanding and appreciation for health and safety. But we have to keep building on that because in reality, it's still going to be 10, 15, 20 years by the time that transition happens. So we can't just wait and say, oh, they're old school. That's how they used to do it. We have to find a way to get that buy-in.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So here's a fun thought. Like, what's sort of one myth about the safety industry you'd like to debunk?
One myth. Hmm. I think a myth about the health and safety industry would be that everything's like from the outside looking in, that everything's like pretty and perfect. Like it's
Right.
when I talk to people from the outside of the industry, outside looking at health and safety and construction, whatever else it is, it's like, oh, that's just requirements, regulations, procedures. They're there. That's what it is. Like you're on a job site, you're on a construction site, it's safe. That's just how it is. The reality is it's not there in most places. Like when you go to these smaller industries, let's say let's take an example that anyone that's listening to this would be like, yeah, okay, you're right. Renovations. If you're in the renovation space and you are doing house renos, there's a good chance, probably I would say a 99% chance that the company, if they're a smaller company and they do like 5 or 6 renos a year, does not have a health and safety program. None of their trades do. They're going on the roof. They don't have harnesses. Nothing is in place. Nothing. Right. And that trickles up as you go from, it could be a company working on a high-rise construction site. They have 25 workers. There's a chance at that smaller segment, they don't have a proper health and safety program in place. It is not there. Health and safety isn't just standard table stakes part of the business. It's not. I mean, it's getting better, but it's not there. There is no gateway. Let me give you an example. Our industry is training and by our industry, I mean construction, is training the new and young workers that are powering this space at the field level by luck of the draw. What company you work with is going to dictate what level of health and safety training you get. It's not like, imagine that's how doctors were trained. Imagine you go to, you are trained in an aspect of how good is that hospital, right? And that's how good you're going to understand that portion of your training. Because you could start working with a 50-person company that has nothing to do with health and safety. And all you're doing is you're learning and working, and 7 years later, you're going to go work in another industry or another part of the industry, maybe for another company. You're bringing that knowledge with you. There is no foundational level of, you want to work in construction, you have to understand this base level of health and safety before you even set foot in this industry, right? So it starts to create this groundswell from the bottom up too. It can't just, because it's very hard. If I care about, for starters, you don't know what you don't know. But if you do care about health and safety and you don't know what you don't know, you're going to adapt to whatever health and safety is there. You could go work for a 30-person or 10 or a 5-person company that also doesn't know what they don't know, and they're consistently putting you in situations that is dangerous and nobody knows. And then that gets taken to another company and they spread. Right? And so then you have these bigger companies. And so I think the biggest myth is that it's taken care of, is that I'm sending like my parents never knew. They were just like, yeah, construction, that's great. You're making good money, you're working. They had no idea that, the first 2 weeks, first month on the job site, I was in charge of replacing a piece of glass on the 40th floor of a building. With no swing sticks training, no harness, no fall protection training, no idea what the safe work practice was. I don't even think I ever replaced a piece of glass before. And I was in charge of 4 people to do that. Right? Like that's crazy. But that's what it was back then. Like I figured it out. I got it done. I progressed in my career. But in reality, when I look back, that was incredibly dangerous. And I know for a fact, like when my son gets older and hopefully he gets into construction, I would love it, but his choice on what he goes and does, I'm going to look at the company he's working with, and I'm going to know whether they have a good process in place. But a lot of people, it's oh yeah, they have health and safety. They don't know what health and safety is, right?
They don't know what health and safety is, and it's taken for granted. Oh, they must be doing something. Well, are they?
They must be working safe. How can they build a high rise or this building or that building and not be working safe?
Oh gosh, I don't want to answer that question because we've all lived it. We've lived those stories where there's been some big shit that's happened that could have never happened, and it got dismissed, and it got not. And I don't know. I don't want to say that somebody made a mistake. I'm sure there's mistakes along the way, but it could be exactly that. It's just people didn't know what they didn't know and didn't know how to react.
And it's all good intentions. I'll give you another story. We had. I was probably 24 years old, and I was 25 maybe. I was running the service department of the window installation company, and we had to replace a piece of what's called spandrel glass, which is basically like a colored glass on the outside of a building. and it was on a townhouse, and it was 25 feet up. So I took my truck, I took two employees, younger employees, but they were experienced. They knew how to replace glass. And I said, here's the ladder. You're both here so that you can hold the ladder and you can do the work. Like my mindset is like, I'm not going to, like, I'm trying to make sure you do this safe. And I get a call an hour later from the person that was with the person on the ladder saying he fell off the ladder. The police are here. The paramedics are here. Everything's like freaking out. It was actually his brother called. And I show up on site and the police told me he died. He had passed
Oh my
away
God.
on the way to the hospital. Fortunately, he did not pass away, but he did flatline on the way to the hospital. And the reality, what happened was the person that was holding the ladder went to the truck to get something. And the other person decided, hey, I'm just going to go up and do this one thing, and reached to try and do something and fell 25 feet and hit his head. And the reality of it is, like, we all had the best intentions of working safe, but there was no formal training. There was no actual procedure and hard coded, like, you do not do this. It's like, hey, we want to do this. Here's somebody else to hold the ladder. And he could have died. He should have been dead in all accounts. And so it happens like that.
Yeah.
And there's many of those situations where they don't die, but they're continuously putting themselves in those situations today, right now.
Or even worse, they do die. And
or they do die.
That's not talked about as much, and it happens, and it's you always kind of look. I love what you say. The intentions are never ill intentions. It's like, the ideology is, well, we think that the guys or the girls knows what they're doing. Like they intend to work safe. True, right? Like, look at the scenario you just described. The intent was like never to go up and fall that day. Shit happens really fast.
Well, and think about the human nature aspect of it. We're raised, so there's a cutoff where you're no longer an adolescent and you're getting into the adulthood and you have a job and you're 18, 19, like, you're working. Prior to that, you're always pushing the limits of, like, my child is scared to ride a bike. Nudge them, like, no, you'll be okay, ride it. They're pushing against their natural fear, right? Going on the playground. Oh, I'm a little scared. It's okay. I'll be here. You won't fall, but go. Like, push those limitations. And so naturally, you're always, like, raising kids to face your fear, and overcome your fear. And then that's what they believe when they get into the work environment, is like, I have to, I got to get the job done. I need to, like, prove myself, whatever it may be. And then there's that aspect. So, like, you have a 19-year-old that's going to go up on a ladder that has never gone on a ladder before. They're going to be terrified to go up 20 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet, and they're going to do it completely differently. They're going to try and do everything as safe and cautiously as possible. Meanwhile, you have somebody else that's 19. They're used to rock climb as a kid. They're not scared of heights. They're not scared of ladders. They're going to climb that ladder in a completely different way, most likely very unsafe, naturally, right? Without any training.
Yeah.
Already you have different exposures. And then let's talk about one other thing. The other thing is, if I am not associating fear with anything, what won't I do? So let's take a health and safety professional. They know the requirements around health and safety. They know all the things to do and not to do. Watch that individual when they're at home at their own house. Are they going to put a harness on to put up their Christmas lights? Are they going to wear steel-toe boots when they mow the lawn? Are they going to wear eye protection, hearing protection? Are they going to research the SDS sheets when they're using the chemicals in their own house? I guarantee you that 0.001% of them will do that.
Right.
So what we're consistently doing is we're saying, hey, in this environment, change the way that you are naturally as a human being and abide by these things. But when you're at home and there's still a stigma there, if I'm the guy with a harness on my roof and a high-vis vest and a hard whatever, my neighbor's going to be like, what the fuck is that jackass doing? He's got his steel-toe boots on again when he's mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not, that's what I mean. It's complex. It's not cut and dry. Health and safety is messy. It's hard. but it's very necessary, because nobody
Very
wants to not come home to their family or whatever it is. And that happens every day.
well. Thank you for this. I mean, you certainly, it's talking about creating the ecosystem of safety and changing the landscape, even just the ideologies. Like when you talk about, working at home, I kind of smile and go, "Yep, been there, done that."
Yeah.
Right? Reach for
Same.
that, reach for that high shelf where it should have been on a different ladder or standing on the top of the ladder, right? You go on a job saying like, "Hey guys, let's not stand on the top ladder." And what the hell am I doing? Right?
Yeah.
Me, it doesn't matter. I'm using myself as an example because I'm no different
Yep.
than other people out there, right? Because like, I'm only doing
100%.
it for a split second, and so thank you for
Yep.
this. This has been magical. This has been great. How do people get in touch with you? I mean, there's so much more to learn.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not as active on LinkedIn as I should, but our team is. So following Salus on LinkedIn, social media. I do respond to my messages on LinkedIn very often as well. So if you feel free, find me on LinkedIn and just ping me. Um, Maybe it's the construction in me. I got to get a little better on the social media front. My marketing team's always on my case about talking more like this on social media, but it goes back to my like, I'm not, I'm a good talker, but not the best at the writing aspect. It's not my forte. So
Well, this has been magical. Thank you, and we're going to help with that. The links for Salus, everything will be right in the show notes. Um, this is huge. This has been a pleasure. It's been an honor. Thank you for sharing space with me today. This
thank
has been
you.
great.
This has been a great conversation. Thanks, Jonathan.